Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're digging into a really interesting mix of sources. We've got a Reddit thread with real user experiences, some tech analyst deep dives, news reports.
Yeah, and it all centers on this fascinating, sometimes pretty tense relationship between Apple and Elon Musk's companies.
Exactly. We're talking about how your iPhone actually works, or maybe doesn't quite work with a Tesla.
Right. And then there's this potentially huge news about Apple maybe teaming up with Starlink for satellite stuff.
Big one. And of course, we have to get into the ongoing, very public arguments between Musk and Apple App Store fees, AI privacy, all that drama.
It covers a lot of ground.
So our mission here is basically to sift through all this, pull out the key stuff, and give you a clear picture of what's going on with these tech giants, their tech, their strategies, maybe even their personalities.
Sounds good. Let's unpack it.
Okay, let's start where a lot of people spend time in the car, specifically if you're an iPhone user jumping into, say, a Tesla Model Y.
Right. And the sources, especially that Reddit thread, they immediately highlight a big difference from something like Apple CarPlay that many people are used to.
Yeah, CarPlay basically puts your iPhone screen, or a version of it, right onto the car's display.
Yeah.
Feels familiar. How does Tesla handle it?
Well, that's the main point. It doesn't. Tesla's OS is pretty much a closed system in that sense. You can't just mirror your iPhone interface onto that big Tesla screen.
Okay, so it's not like a second screen for your phone.
Not at all.
So what can you do then as an iPhone user in a Tesla? What actually works?
Well, the basics are there, connected via Bluetooth, standard stuff, making calls, taking calls.
Okay.
You can send and get texts. The car reads them out, and you dictate replies using Tesla's voice commands. Importantly, not using Siri.
Right, no Siri integration there. And music, podcasts.
Yep. You can stream audio from your phone, Apple Music, Spotify, Pocket Casts, whatever app you use that streams over Bluetooth.
But controlling that music, the sources seem to suggest that's pretty basic through the car interface.
That's exactly it. Through Bluetooth, you're usually limited to play, pause, skip forward, skip back, using the steering wheel buttons or maybe some on-screen controls.
So if you want to, like, browse your playlist or search for a specific song...
You got to pick up your phone, which, isn't great while you're driving. Definitely not ideal.
No, not ideal at all. Okay, what about navigation? Tesla has its own nav, right? But can you use, say, Apple Maps or Waze on that main screen?
That's another major point of friction we saw in the sources, especially from users.
Yeah.
Tesla's nav it's Tesla's nav. It uses Google Map data, apparently, and has features like planning routes with charging stops, avoiding tolls, things like that.
Right.
But no, you absolutely cannot display Apple Maps, Google Maps, Waze, or even those EV routing apps like a Better Route Planner, ABRP, on the main Tesla screen.
So you're stuck with Tesla's system if you want it on the big display.
Pretty much. We saw mentions of people mounting their phone next to the screen just to use Waze or Apple Maps simultaneously. Kind of defeats the purpose of the big integrated screen, doesn't it?
Yeah, really does. And voice commands. You mentioned no Siri for texts. Is it just Tesla's system for everything?
Correct. The voice button on the steering wheel activates Tesla's voice assistant. No way to natively trigger Siri through the car's mics or buttons.
So people just yell, "Hey Siri," at their phone.
That seems to be the workaround, yeah. If the phone's close enough to hear you.
What about apps actually built into the Tesla system? Any overlap with phone apps?
They have some native streaming apps. Spotify is one. But Apple Music is notably not built in right now.
Okay. Though sources mentioned rumors it might come eventually.
Yeah, rumors persist. A lot of iPhone users would obviously like to see that happen, especially if they're coming from cars with CarPlay, where it's seamless.
It sounds like the lack of deep integration forces users to get kind of creative.
Oh, definitely. The source has talked about people using third-party apps, something like Remote for Tesla, and also using iOS shortcuts.
Shortcuts, like how?
Things like setting up a shortcut on their iPhone to automatically trigger the car's climate control before they leave the house, or sending a location from their iPhone calendar straight to the Tesla navigation.
Clever. So they're bridging the gap themselves where Apple and Tesla haven't.
Exactly. It shows a demand for more seamless integration that just isn't there natively.
Okay, so boiling down this first part, the takeaway on Tesla and iPhones is?
It's functional for the absolute basics via Bluetooth calls, audio streaming, but it fundamentally lacks that deep OS-level mirroring and app integration you get with CarPlay. It forces you into Tesla's world, relying on their systems and user ingenuity for anything more advanced.
Right. A very different philosophy to integrating the phone. Okay, that sets the scene for one kind of interaction or maybe lack of interaction. But now let's pivot to something completely different: connectivity from the sky. This was really interesting in the sources.
Yeah, this is where things get potentially really significant. We're seeing reports that Apple, which, invested in its own satellite SOS feature with Globalstar.
Right, the emergency SOS via satellite.
Exactly. Now, reports suggest they're working on a partnership with SpaceX's Starlink.
That's Elon Musk's company. Seems like a big shift. What do the sources say this partnership involves?
It looks like they're working together to bring direct-to-cell satellite access to iPhones, potentially rolling out with iOS 18.3, according to some reports.
Wow. Okay, how is that different from the existing emergency feature?
It's quite different. The Global Star system was mainly for sending short emergency texts. Sometimes it needed, specific antennas in the newer phones, and you might even have had to point your phone at the sky.
Right, I remember seeing demos of that, finding this satellite signal.
Starlink's approach, this direct-to-cell idea, is designed to work differently. It aims to use the standard LTE antennas already in phones, including iPhones.
So no special pointing needed.
That's the goal. It would need a software update, firmware update on the phone, but the idea is the satellite acts more like a regular cell tower when you're out of range of ground networks.
Yeah.
Much more seamless.
And the sources highlighted the potential capacity increase with Starlink.
Yeah, that's a really big point. Starlink's satellite constellation is just much, much larger. So while the service might start with relatively low data speeds, think texts first, maybe expanding beyond just emergencies, and then potentially voice and data later.
Right.
The overall capacity could be significantly higher than what Globalstar offered, meaning more people could connect, potentially making it more reliable in coverage gaps.
Is this actually happening yet?
It's reportedly in beta testing right now. The sources mentioned T-Mobile is involved in the U.S., testing it on a limited number of Samsung phones currently.
Okay, so Android first for the beta.
Seems that way for the initial public tests. But the key thing is the plan to expand compatibility via that iOS update, which would suddenly bring this capability to millions and millions of existing iPhones.
That really makes you wonder, though. Why would Apple do this? They invested in Globalstar, built that emergency feature.
Right.
Why partner with Starlink, a Musk venture?
Good question. The analysis in the sources points towards a couple of key advantages for Starlink. Scalability, just the sheer number of satellites and potential capacity.
Right.
And that user experience factor. Not having to consciously point your phone is a huge usability win if they can make it work reliably.
Right.
Makes satellite connectivity feel less like an emergency-only thing and more like just extended coverage.
But it's not all smooth sailing. There are hurdles, right? Regulatory stuff.
Definitely. The FCC is looking into potential interference issues, making sure Starlink doesn't mess with other satellite or terrestrial signals. And competitors who have their own satellite deals are, perhaps unsurprisingly, lodging complaints.
And what about user concerns mentioned in the sources? Anything stand out?
A couple of things. One is the practical side, potential for automatic connections to satellite when you don't expect it, maybe leading to roaming charges. Though sources did note you can usually control data roaming in your phone settings.
Okay, manageable, hopefully. Anything else?
Yeah, a more geopolitical or control-related concerns surfaced in some discussions. The fact that this critical communication layer would be controlled by Elon Musk.
Ah.
One source brought up the situation in Ukraine, specifically referencing reports about Starlink access during the conflict. It mentioned that initial reports about service being intentionally cut off for a specific drone attack were later corrected.
How so?
The correction indicated that Starlink hadn't actually been activated in that specific region at the time rather than being actively disabled. And later, the U.S. military procured Starlink services for Ukraine. We're just relaying what the sources reported there, but it highlights the kind of questions that arise when one person controls such vital infrastructure.
Understood. So looking at the bigger picture here, this potential Apple-Starlink partnership.
It could be transformative, really. It moves satellite connectivity from a niche, emergency-focused feature towards something much more mainstream. If it works as planned, it could bring basic messaging, maybe more later, to vast numbers of existing phones in remote areas globally. Huge implications for safety and just basic connectivity.
Okay, so we've got limited integration in the car, a potential partnership in the sky. Now let's dive into the third area, the straight-up feud. The public clashes between Musk and Apple.
Right. And our sources make it clear this isn't new. It's been simmering for years, but things have definitely gotten hotter recently around a few key issues.
The App Store fees seem like a perennial complaint.
Absolutely. That 30% commission Apple takes on in-app purchases. Musk has been railing against this for a long time, publicly calling it stuff like a secret 30% tax on the internet.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah, and even posting memes, like one source mentioned, basically saying pay the 30% or go to war. It hits companies directly, including his own, like with the subscription for X Premium, formerly Twitter Blue. And it's a huge issue for industries like mobile gaming.
Then there was the advertising angle, specifically on X, formerly Twitter.
Yes, another big flashpoint. Sources reported that after Musk took over Twitter, Apple, which had apparently been Twitter's biggest advertiser, significantly pulled back its ad spending.
That must have hurt.
You'd assume so. Musk reacted very publicly, questioning Apple's motives, asking Tim Cook directly if Apple hates free speech.
Wow. What did the sources suggest was Apple's reasoning?
The reporting suggested Apple's media agency advised pausing the ads due to brand safety concerns. Basically, worries about their ads appearing next to potentially problematic content during all the upheaval at Twitter post-takeover.
And that ties into the whole content moderation fight, doesn't it? Musk claimed Apple threatened to kick Twitter off the App Store.
He did. He claimed Apple threatened removal over content moderation policies, specifically around hate speech. Apple, of course, has App Store rules that all apps need to follow regarding content.
How did Musk frame his approach to content on X?
His public stance became freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. The idea being that problematic content wouldn't necessarily be removed, but its visibility would be severely limited, de-boosted, as he put it.
Did the sources suggest this was a genuine policy shift, or?
Well, some analysis explored that. They noted that while Musk's rhetoric was very strong, the actual documented changes to X's official content rules weren't always as dramatic, which led some to speculate it was partly a PR move to appeal to a certain audience.
Okay, so fees, ads, content rules. But the most recent and maybe most intense blow-up is about AI, right? Apple's deal with OpenAI.
Absolutely. This is the current hot topic. Apple announced they're integrating OpenAI's ChatGPT into their new Apple Intelligence features coming in iOS 18 and other OS updates.
How is Apple positioning this integration, privacy-wise?
They're really emphasizing safeguards. They say users will get a clear prompt before any data goes to ChatGPT. Queries sent won't be logged by OpenAI, IP addresses will be obscured. And they're stressing that a lot of the AI processing will actually happen on the device itself, not even going to the cloud, let alone OpenAI.
Sounds like they anticipated concerns, but Musk's reaction
Was immediate and extreme. He called the integration an unacceptable security violation, referred to it as creepy spyware.
Strong words.
Very. He publicly questioned if Apple even knows what it's doing in AI and whether they can actually guarantee OpenAI will protect user data once it leaves Apple's ecosystem.
And he didn't stop there. He threatened to ban iPhones at his companies.
He did, a very dramatic public threat, banning all Apple devices, iPhones, iPads, Macs from Tesla, SpaceX, X, Neuralink, the Boring Company. That's potentially over 100,000 employees affected.
What was the mechanism? Checking phones at the door?
He literally said visitors would have to check their iPhones at the door, where they'd be stored in a Faraday cage, basically a box that blocks all radio signals.
That's quite a statement. Why such an extreme reaction to this specific partnership, beyond the stated privacy concerns?
Well, the source is analyzing this point pretty clearly to Musk's own competitive interest. Remember, he co-founded OpenAI, then left, and is now a major critic.
Right.
And crucially, he now runs his own AI company, xAI, which has its own chatbot, Grok, competing directly with OpenAI.
Ah, so it's rivalry.
It seems like a potent mix. Genuine security concerns from his perspective, perhaps, but very clearly blended with intense competitive rivalry against both Apple for integrating a competitor's AI so deeply and against OpenAI itself.
This whole feud really throws Apple's power into sharp relief, doesn't it? Through the App Store, the ecosystem.
It really does. Controlling the gateway to billions of users gives Apple immense leverage. And conversely, it shows the market impact Musk can have with just his public statements. Sources noted Apple stock actually dipped briefly right after his ban threat. It's a real clash of tech titans.
So we've journeyed through this deep dive, looking at sources covering everything from the dashboard experience to satellite links to these very public battles. It really paints a picture of a complex, multi-layered relationship, or sometimes lack of relationship, between Apple and Musk's world.
Yeah, it's a mix, isn't it? You've got areas where some basic integration is necessary, like Bluetooth in the car, then surprising potential partnerships like Starlink, and then these really fierce clashes over core business models, control, and now the future of AI and privacy.
What really stands out after going through all this material is just how tangled these different tech areas become. Cars, satellites, phones, AI, it's all getting interconnected.
And how the decisions and maybe even the personalities of the leaders at the top can ripple down to affect the features in your car, whether your phone works off-grid or how your data gets handled. It's quite striking.
Yeah, this deep dive definitely shows that while we all want that seamless tech experience, the reality behind the curtain, the corporate strategy, the competition, the power plays is anything but seamless.
Absolutely. So maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. As AI gets woven deeper into the fabric of our devices and things like satellite connectivity become more common, how much control are you ultimately comfortable with these massive tech companies having over your data, your access, your digital life, especially when they're led by figures with such strong viewpoints and often directly competing agendas? Something to think about.